Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Pink and Friday night preview show. Norwich City, of course, travelling to AFC Bournemouth on Sunday, which means we get a whole extra day to dwell over what might be on Sunday. My name is Connor Southwell. Going to be joined by Dave Freezer, looking ahead to this weekend's fixture. And I mean, if you look out the window, the weather's pretty terrible. So you don't need any other excuse to stay inside and sort of speak about Norwich City with us for the next 45 minutes or so. Dave, how are you? I can see we've both got hoodies on, so both keeping warm.
It is a rank day, isn't it? We've got a pond in our garden that we didn't have yesterday. So I've, on brand, of course, made myself a cup of tea ready for a good chat.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, our concern is usually with fence panels, but I'm yet to see one sort of fly up. Well, I'm yet to see one out of my bedroom window, so that's always a good sign. They're firmly still in place, which is good news. Over the next sort of 45 minutes or so, we'll be talking everything Norwich City, really. Kieran Dowell, Jakob Sorensen's injury, Emi Buendia, Ben Gibson. We'll be hearing from a little bit of Daniel Farke as well. And we want all your comments, views and opinions ahead of Sunday. Make sure you stick them in the comment box, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube or Twitter. And we'll try and get through as many of your questions and your thoughts as we can before we ride into the sunset, or the overcast nature of today later on this evening. Dave, let's start with Kieran Dowell. It was a bit of a blow, I think, to everyone watching him go off last weekend, but even more of a blow when you find out that he's out for 12 to 14 weeks, given how significant a summer signing he was and given how highly they seem to rate him. This is a real setback for him.
Yeah, it's almost exactly the same as what happened to Kenny McLean, isn't it? Who I think that was actually on his first game for Norwich, or maybe his first Carrow Road game, wasn't it? McLean in the League Cup, and then did his ankle, was out until January. But as Daniel sort of pitched today in his press conference, came back and had a real impact on that season. So it's incredibly frustrating for him. I don't think we've really seen the best of him yet, because we haven't seen the best of Norwich yet, have we? It feels like they're trying to find their rhythm, but more than anything, that first two games, it's felt like him and Cantwell have been too similar. They've got in each other's way quite a lot. So we'll see how that develops. But for now, I mean, unfortunately, I know all about ankle ligament injuries. I've done both of my ankles twice in a variety of strange ways, and that's why I stopped playing Sunday League football, and it's incredibly frustrating. So I hope that he doesn't end up having a massive problem with his ankles from here, because the moment it felt quite innocuous, didn't it? It was Ben Davies made the tackle, got the ball cleanly, but our photographer Paul Chesterton got a sort of perfect snap of it where you could actually see his foot just get sort of caught under Davies' landing, and then the trailing foot comes through and it almost snapped him over. And he's done his ankle ligaments straight in for surgery, and it's a big blow. But Daniel said was about as encouraging as he could have been, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, and it's looking like we aren't going to see Kieran Dowell in a Norwich shirt until January, which is obviously incredibly disappointing news. And yeah, I can certainly see the parallels with that Kenny McLean injury, and he did come back, in fairness, and make a fairly big impact, didn't he, towards the back end of the season, in that title-winning season. So hopefully Kieran Dowell could do something similar, and Daniel Farke said today he would give him sort of 3 or 4 days to be disappointed, but then he wanted his mindset to shift and to be determined to recover and get back. And what we have sort of seen with Norwich City injuries and their medical staff is they have, as a rule, over the last few years, been able to get players back a little bit quicker than the original diagnosis. So I guess that's the positive that Kieran Dowell can have if he puts in the work, and if everything goes right, then hopefully, maybe being a bit optimistic, it can be towards the 12-week scale and not the 14.
Yeah, I guess so. But the reaction to it from Norwich fans was, "Oh, here we go again." But this is just bad luck, and Norwich have had a real bad run of luck with injuries, and unfortunately it is part of the game. Every season you're going to get a player who gets injured. Go back to Daniel Farke's first season, Closer and Pritchard both done in pre-season, weren't they, in that Cambridge game? And there you go, you lose 2 big players for an extended amount of time, so you do have to be ready for it. You do have to be expecting that some of your better players will get injured at some point. It's very rare that a team manages to go through a season without any major injuries. And they managed to win the title in spite of bad injuries. Leitner and Closer both missed big chunks of it. Hanley missed the first half of the season. We just said about McLean. They did have injury issues. The big one in that season was that Pookie stayed fit the whole time, wasn't it? And managed to rack up that 30 goals. So, yeah, let's hope that he recovers properly, and then we get to see the best of him from January, because I think, if I remember rightly, in our Pink and Live before the Huddersfield game, I think I predicted he'd be player of the season. So that's probably that one out of the window now, isn't it?
Yeah, unless he has a really good second half of the season. Of course, Grant Hanley was out for a while, wasn't he, in his first year, and came second in player of the season, I think. I can't remember just quite how long he was out, but it was
not as long as his second season, was it? But
no. Yeah, there we go. And Edward's kind of done the perfect segue for me on Facebook, and he's come in with a comment, and he says, do you think Emmy will be taking Kieran Dowell's place? I guess that's the obvious sort of like replacement, isn't it, Dave, given that Daniel said that Emmy would be available for selection this weekend, and given the quality that we all know he possesses. Maybe looking on the positive side, this has given a reason for Daniel Farke to drop Buendia back into the fold straight away, whereas perhaps before he might have had to be a bit patient on the subs bench.
Yeah, if Emmy is fit and ready to start, then by all means I'd have him in there, and I would probably start Boheta ahead of Hernandez. How many times and how many people did you hear say before the start of the season that O'Neill was going to tear it up this year, and that he was one of the better players towards the end of last season, that he was poised to take the championship by storm again, but it's not quite happened for him yet, has it? He's not quite looked himself. So yeah, for me, I'd be going Boheta, Cantwell, Buendia, and hopefully Todd and Emmy would know each other's game that little bit better to not get in each other's way, like Buendia and Cantwell did a little bit. What did you think of sort of what Daniel said? Did you get the feeling that he's thinking of starting him?
Yeah, I did. Of course, I think he's sort of been a bit cautious just by the fact that he didn't really seem in a great way at the start of the week, and maybe missed a couple of training sessions, but seems to have been okay since. They've of course got a session tomorrow as well, so whether it's a case of sort of wrapping him up in cotton wool or not, I'm not sure, but to me it kind of felt like it was going to be Buendia that came in, and he kind of said about his quality, but I guess then he caveated that and said it's not like a computer game or a simulation game where you can just put him in and with all the quality he's got and it just works straight away. So I think there are still some elements that Daniel wants to see, particularly sort of off the ball in terms of his positional discipline and stuff. But I think the reality is, and I think every Norwich fan knows this, and probably every Norwich fan wants this, in terms of if Emmy Buendia is fit and available, then he probably gets in that side, just because he does give them that little edge that can win games, particularly in the Championship, with individual quality. And I think that could be the difference on a game like Sunday, where it's going to be two teams sort of freshly relegated from the Premier League doing battle, so to speak. It might be one on a piece of individual brilliance, and Emmy Buendia can provide that, and that equally he can provide chances for other players as well. So I just think he's too good to leave out, particularly in a game that Norwich City, for me, need a performance in. I think we've seen 4 points out of 6, which is a good return, but probably without a real standout performance. So it'd be good to see that on Sunday. Stephen,
Emmy as well. I'd be excited to see Emmy back as well, and I think a lot of fans would be, because I remember writing a column towards the end of the 2018-19 season, and I think I'd angled it off on something like, it's been like Norwich have had a player from Barcelona on loan this season, because he was so good that year. He was way above Championship standards, and before Norwich stepped into the Premier League, everyone expected him to be the big asset. Now, it didn't quite go as smoothly as that, but yeah, I'd definitely be excited to see him back. We should just mention as well, shouldn't we, that the under-23s are playing, and Josip Dermic, Mo Leitner, both in the starting lineup. So a little bit of a surprise to see Leitner back in. Who else? Michael McGovern in goal. Then it's mostly young lads, and they're playing Palace at Colney despite this horrific weather, and they are winning 1-0. William Hondermark scored the goal. So yeah, I'll keep an eye on that.
Good stuff. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see just how Mo Leitner does in that game. We'll come to some of your comments now on Facebook. Stephen's come in with a triple header of comments, which is great to see. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us. He said, I'd like to see Josh Martin come in and Emmy Buendia as well. He's also then go on to say that he wants to see Zimbo drop out for Ben Gibson. And then he's finished off by saying, do you guys think they should drop Kenny McLean? McLean's an interesting one. He seems to split people a little bit, Dave. What are your views on him? Because I actually felt like Huddersfield, he had a fairly decent display alongside Skip, but last week I felt he does that thing where what he does on occasion where he just sort of slips out of a game.
Yeah, I thought him and Skip were, like you say, decent at Huddersfield, but nothing special. Skip had a bit of a nightmare first half last week, didn't he? And showed that bit of naivety. And Kenny probably grew into it a bit in the second half and started to show a bit of leadership and determination stuff. But I said in my video verdict afterwards that I'd have rather Alex Tettey was there than either of them in that game, because neither of them were as good a defensive midfielder as Tettey is, still at 34 years old. But Norwich shouldn't be in the position where they're saying that. But as we have to caveat everything with at the moment, we're still not seeing what Norwich City are yet this season. They haven't got the rhythm. They've just got to rebuild confidence, to be perfectly frank. They have just suffered a horrible relegation, and we are watching them going through that process. And it depends how slow that process is. So for this sort of a game at Bournemouth, I personally would be going with Tettey and McLean, or maybe Skip. I can't say I'm too fussed whichever one, but I think Tettey needs to come in. And it's interesting actually to come back to you on Daniel's presser, what he was saying about Sorensen. He's had that injury scare, but it sounds like he was probably in his thoughts, wasn't he?
Yeah, he seems to have had the unluckiest start to his Norwich City career, didn't he? I mean, in terms of not being quite ready at the start, then going away on international duty and having an experience that they didn't really feel benefited him. He didn't play for Denmark under 21s and was away for sort of a week to 14 days, wasn't he? And they were a bit disappointed with that experience. So then he had to come in and have a full week of training again, but then that was disrupted because he got a slight cold and had to miss a few training sessions. And then this week, he's picked up a slight knee injury. It's his inner ligaments in his knee, which isn't serious. Thankfully, he's going to be out for about 4 to 5 days. Daniel expected, just rolled it in training. I think initially they were a lot more concerned, but he did get a scan, and luckily it revealed just a slight ligament strain, which is good news. But he did say that he was hoping that Jakob Sorensen would be in the 18 for this weekend. Now, I don't necessarily think that means that he was going to start, but certainly a place on the bench, and that would have been a big step forward from where we've been with him in the last few weeks. So it feels like a real shame, especially considering how highly they do think of him. And it just kind of feels like he's not really been able to get his Norwich career out of first gear yet. And I think for him especially, since coming from Denmark, it's such a big move for him. To be unable to hit the ground running is such a shame, and especially when I'm not quite sure Kenny McLean has really sort of truly identified what sort of midfielder he is yet, and that's probably something that we need to see this season in terms of his progression. And certainly Ollie Skip, I think, has had an excellent, very good game at Huddersfield, and then a contrasting one against Preston last weekend where, and Daniel said this today, he felt he was at fault for the goal. So there's still places up for grabs in that midfield, and that's kind of where you feel a bit sorry for Sorensen. Hopefully he can get himself back to full fitness and get himself in contention for Derby, which is certainly the plan. John Bull on Facebook agrees with you, Dave. He thinks that Alex Tettey needs to be in the starting 11. I think Bournemouth in the Premier League last year was when he came back into the 11, wasn't he? And suddenly we saw a much more solid Norwich performance, and they actually got a clean sheet in that game, and he played certainly a large portion of the second half in centre-back with Ibrahim Amadou, I seem to remember. And it's crazy just how important Alex Tettey still is to this Norwich side, as you said, at the age of 34, isn't it? Yeah,
he had to move back, didn't he, when Godfrey went off at Bournemouth and then Cardwell came on. So then he was in centre-back again. And I interviewed Alex after that game, actually, and they were really, really chuffed with that, the way they ground out a clean sheet and a 0-0 at that point, although it obviously isn't a 0-0 is never very exciting, but that was just what they needed at the time. And for me, Tettey's got to start tomorrow Sunday, because this is going to be a difficult game. I know they played last night at Bournemouth and they gave Man City a good run for their money, but they have lost a lot of talent, but they still have a very good squad at this level. It's still a very well-run club, and as we know, they're not short of money. They a lot of people like to overlook the amount of money that has gone into that club to sort of create these
fairy tale.
Exactly. I would be going Tettey and McLean from the start, and then maybe be looking to bring Skip on for McLean if things aren't working out creatively from there. Because the thing with Kenny is that he is reliable defensively on the whole, isn't he? If you forget the goal at Arsenal, was it when he came on and lost the ball straight away, and his aerial ability is a real asset. They struggle at set pieces, so that's not something you want to give up. And Skip showed that bit of naivety with the penalty against Preston, didn't he? When it wasn't the biggest foul in the world, obviously, but he gave the Preston player the opportunity to go down. He gratefully took it, and the referee had a decision to make it and gave that penalty. And the second goal, Skip should have been tracking Sinclair. Zimmerman and Aaron's got themselves in a muddle as well, but there was just a gaping hole in the middle of Norwich's defence, which, a nice pass took advantage of it, but it was ridiculous, the parting of the seas, really. So, I think Skip is going to have a major part to play in the season, but this is a big game. And, you see the interview that Andrew Sermon has done with the club ahead of the game, to his former clubs, of course, and he said that this is massive because it's early. He didn't say it was a 6-pointer, but he was talking about it like it was that kind of thing, because getting momentum at this point, this early stage of the season, can mean so much. So for me, Tettey and McLean central midfield. Sorensen, like so many of them, really, he's stepping up quite a lot. He was playing for a team who got relegated from the Danish top flight last season, wasn't he? He is in the Denmark under-21s, but he's not starting, so it's not like he's one of their star players. I'm really interested to see what he's got about him, but I don't really remember from what I saw of pre-season him standing out in the memory particularly. So, for me, it's still Tettey's not been sort of put away in the cupboard just yet.
No, for me, I think that's the area of the pitch. Maybe with centre back as well, I look has been most up for grabs. It's certainly the place where as good as Ollie Skip was against Huddersfield. Certainly, I think there were a few issues last weekend. It's certainly going to be interesting to see whether Daniel retains his trust in him this weekend. And Ian Honeyman has came in and said Tettey and Skip again on Sunday. And it's going to be interesting to see where he goes, because this is a game that perhaps some managers will feel like they do need a bit more experience in, given, as you said there, it's so early in the season, but it is such a big game in terms of each side probably trying to lay down their stool and show people that they are very serious in this division.
I could see it being 0-0 again. Quite comfortably. I could see them both being a bit nervous and a bit tentative about not wanting to lose to one of the teams that will hopefully be their promotion rivals. Narrowly, and I think that's the way that Daniel will go as well. But I don't want to be down on Skip at this point. We're 2 games into the season, so as I say, we're still formulating our full opinions on them. And I am excited by what Skip's going to bring to the party. But as I said from the start, I think there's always a lot of excitement about Premier League loans, aren't there? And we've seen plenty fall away, and obviously Harry Kane is the big one, but there was a big injury issue involved in that one as well. But Skip is a young man, and we saw it with Harrison Reed, that Harrison Reed was decent in games, but then in some games he was pretty poor as well, and in the end he ended up being almost a better right back for Norwich than a central midfielder. But we've just seen him play a major part in Fulham getting promoted to the Premier League. So, he's got that ability in him, but this is Skip's first loan. I don't think we can take it as a given that just because he plays for Tottenham that he's going to be a star for Norwich. I hope he does really well, and I am excited to see how he develops. But, I just always, sometimes transfers, people seem to act like they're definitely going to be a success. And how many times have we seen when there's hype about a transfer that ends up falling down? Look at Amadou. You mentioned him a minute ago. All the fuck about Amadou joining, the tracking, the plane, and all that rubbish. And then, to be fair to the bloke, he had to persevere in defence, and that basically ruined his spell for him because he never really got a chance to get a rhythm in midfield. But pretty quickly, he didn't look like a Daniel Farke player, did he? So, as I've perhaps grown older and hopefully a little bit wiser, I get less excited about transfers at the start and try to wait and see how it actually works out.
Yeah, I've got a new phrase I'm adopting at the start of the season, which is comments, not conclusions. I think that's probably the best place to be at the moment, given it's so early on. Thank you all so much for your comments. I can see we've got plenty coming across through on all platforms, which is great. I'm going to come to Anthony's, and then we'll hear a bit from Daniel Farke. Anthony has said, just to round off this debate, and it's a question I'm sure we've had a lot of time, so I'm going to try and rephrase it, Dave. He said, throw in something else in the mix. Many people asking for Godfrey as a defensive midfielder. With Zimmerman and Gibson at the back, could that work? What are your thoughts? And then I'll add a question to that, which is, this is a question that's been put to Ben himself a few times. What exactly has he said about it? Because I think it's fair to say that Daniel Farke doesn't see Godfrey as a midfielder anymore. Does Godfrey see himself as a defensive midfielder?
Well, he's always gone along with the party line, really. He's not going to contradict his boss, is he? And he's always been reasonably convincing with it. I think, the value of a left side, he's not left-footed, is he? He's comfortable on his left, but he's been playing generally as a left-sided centre-back. But more than that, one who's comfortable with the ball at his feet, someone who's a good passer of the ball. You see the elevation that John Stones had to get to Manchester City. Okay, it's not worked out for him, but he still is building a career at very high levels. Played for England in the World Cup and things like that, hasn't he? And because he's a ball-playing centre half, a modern centre back, and that there's value in that. So yeah, Ben's always gone along with what Daniel said, and Daniel from the start has always, there was that line, wasn't there, about world-class centre back. But okay, it's League One, but that season was Shrewsbury, the loan. That one season, they absolutely raved about him. Described him as like a midfield wrecking ball, and he was voted into their team of the decade, wasn't he? Just based on that one season. So that's the impact that he made there. But I mean, I've talked about this for quite a long time, and eventually I've just stopped talking about it because Farke's not going to do it. Farke sees him as a centre back. And it is a bit frustrating because he looks like he's got all the elements that you could want to make him a real good defensive midfielder. I remember when Ben was coming through as well, he got a couple of red cards for the under-23s and he was overly aggressive, and he's managed to sort of work that out of his game a little bit as well. So whether that was the thing that persuaded Farke that maybe he wasn't quite right for midfield, I'm not sure. But he and Ben have both been asked about it a lot, and they've both stuck to that line, haven't they? So, yeah, tomorrow, it feels a little bit harsh on Zimbo to be dropped out. But, you've brought Ben Godfrey in with the prospect of a quite big money deal at the end of the season, if all goes well. This is a guy who has got massive potential. Is someone that they clearly want to be successful. So you've got to give him a go at some point. But it feels a little bit harsh. But Godfrey was very good at Huddersfield. He was the better of the two at Huddersfield. Was probably just about the better of the two last week. But they both had slightly funny games. Like for that second goal, Zimmerman sort of wandered out, followed his man out of position, and Godfrey did the same at one point, and that left the hole that Kintier then had to bring down someone and got booked for. And that Alex Neil actually said he thought he should have got a red card for, shouldn't he? Which I don't think is right. He wasn't the last man. He wasn't far from being the last man, but he wasn't. Zimmerman was there. So, yeah, for me, I probably would go with Zimmerman and Gibson. And if Daniel didn't go with that, I would guess that's because it's Bournemouth and he's not wanting to make wholesale changes against such a difficult team.
Yeah, we'll have more on Ben Gibson in a moment. Just to round off this debate on Godfrey, Ian on Facebook has said, I think that would be Godfrey's best position. I presume he's talking about defensive midfield and would like to see it tried. Yeah, certainly for me, when Ben Godfrey looks his best is when he's bringing the ball out of defence and stepping into midfield. And I get the disappointment after how much hype there was with him as a youngster. But like you say, I mean, Daniel Farke sees him as a centre back, and ultimately his opinion is much more significant than anyone's, I'm afraid. Right, let's hear from City's boss. This is him speaking about Max Aarons. You may have heard that he's been linked with Barcelona, and this is him talking about the speculation. And then I'll come to Dave and get his reaction to it. But it's been quite the week for Max Aarons, and by the sounds of it, he's dealt with it quite well. It's Daniel Farke.
Yeah, good to take a bit like the seriously out of this was having some jokes, and even the lads were joking a bit about it. And Max is a great lad. He handles in in a perfect way. So several times he was then called Dani Alves or Barca or something like this in training, and then he handled this with a smile. So because we're meanwhile used to it, but like I mentioned before, so it's a bit of a tricky period. I'll be really honest. So especially after relegation, of course, several lads are linked with the move because they are so much full of potential. And I think this is also one of the main reasons that many teams, after suffering relegation in the beginning, they struggle to deliver with results and performances. And I'm pretty happy that we have already delivered with 4 points out of 2 games.
There you go. That's Daniel Farke on Max Aarons. I think we all did a bit of a double take last Saturday, Dave, when we woke up and saw that transfer rumour, and then did another double take when we heard that there was genuinely some truth into it. And it's been interesting to watch it develop. Obviously, Daniel Farke said today that he expects Max Aarons to be a Norwich player after the weekend. So that's interesting. What have you made of this week? You've followed Max's career since he was fairly young, emerging on the scene at Norwich. Were you surprised, I guess, by that link? Because he seems to have been linked with a number of top sides without really there being anything more in it than interest. But given his attributes and his quality, and I guess his development as well, is that a rumour that surprised you?
Oh yeah. It's a huge step up, isn't it? And that would be my worry. And interesting to hear. Paddy interviewed Greg Broughton a couple of days ago, didn't he? He was the former head of the academy at Norwich, and he was responsible for bringing Jamal and Max over from Luton, or sort of indirectly anyway, because he was in charge of the Luton academy before he came to Norwich. And he similarly was saying that, make sure it's the right decision. You don't want to get parked on the bench for a season and just ruin all your development, do you? And it's a huge step up to play for Barcelona. The pressure compared to playing for a club like Norwich City, as much as we all, it's the big part of our lives, compared to a global powerhouse like Barcelona. If you have a bad game for them on the big stage, an 8-2 loss to Bayern Munich in the Champions League quarterfinals, for instance, it gets noticed. So the pressure to deal with that. Max is still only 20, and if you were perfectly honest in terms of his ability and fulfilling his full potential, would he be actually better playing another season in the Championship, hopefully, then another Premier League season follows, and then he's 22, hopefully maybe near the England squad maybe by that point, and if Norwich were to survive or go back down, whatever were to happen, then he would definitely be a very saleable asset at that point to a Premier League club, where there may still be a few doubts, because we all know he's good going forward. We all know he's got the pace. He's quite a balanced fullback, isn't he? But defensively, there are still moments when he gets caught out, and aerially he doesn't always quite pick his moment. He did have a good moment aerially early in the Preston game, didn't he? Because Tom Barkhuizen had a quite a decent size advantage on him, but he did enough to get up and disrupt him when a ball went to the back post, and it looked like Barkhuizen was going to be able to nod it in. So. Yeah, I mean, it has looked, to be fair, ever since the story broke, which was David Ornstein of The Athletic, wasn't it? And the lad from Sky Sports as well, Kava Solokol. And the story was saying at that point that Barcelona had come in for Aarons at Norwich. They'd made these loan offers. Norwich hadn't been impressed by the loan element, so had knocked it back. And that they'd then focused their attentions on Serginho Dest at Ajax. And basically what we've seen ever since is Barca and Bayern Munich battling over Dest, and if one of them doesn't get him, then maybe they'll turn their attentions to Max. But I don't think this is one, and it's not even maybe quite at the levels of Jamal Lewis with Liverpool, because they had made a tangible offer. Barcelona haven't ever actually made a firm offer to Norwich, have they? They've just discussed these loan propositions. There's certainly never been an offer of, here's 20 million plus 10 million. It was discussed, wasn't it? But basically it all fell down on the loan suggestions. Whereas with Jamal, they actually put some money on the table, and Norwich said, well, that's not enough. And then immediately we had the element with the Greek lad that emerged, didn't we? And it looked like Liverpool were actually just trying to drive the price down with Olympiacos to get Tsimikas, and sort of use Jamal a little bit. So equally, that wasn't too hard for Jamal to shake off. And I think with this one, Max it's just good for his profile. I don't think he's going to be sat there crying his eyes out thinking, oh my gosh, my big move has come and gone. He's 20. He's still very much on the upward curve. He's a happy lad. He's a good camper. He's a popular guy in the squad, and you can just hear it in training, can't you? Oh, here he comes, Grant Hanley, as he came on. Look, it's Barcelona's next bright thing. He's going to be playing with Messi next week. Come on, don't tackle him, lads. Careful. So I bet they had great fun with him, and that's all good because it keeps his feet on the ground. But we'll see. With the Sam Byram element of this as well, being out injured until January, Norwich don't want to lose Max at the moment. So anyone short of one of the real big boys offering real good money, I think Stuart Webber will stand firm. Yeah,
I think he's proven that to be the case. He's certainly not got overawed by negotiating with Liverpool or Barcelona. So on that evidence, who else is bigger, really? And it's certainly going to be interesting. I think the biggest praise you can give to Max Aarons is, after all the furore of that speculation last Saturday, which leaked on the morning of the Preston game, which I certainly don't think Norwich were particularly happy about, and I'm sure neither was he either particularly. He then went out and put in a very, very good performance against Preston.
Yeah, although the information leaked from somewhere, didn't it? And if Barcelona had turned their attentions to another player at that point in Dest, then I wonder who would have been leaking that Barcelona are interested in Max. It would have been somebody with a prior interest in building up his reputation, wouldn't it? So, Max will obviously have known about Barca's interest a long while before we did. He would have been well aware of what was going on, but hopefully he just used it as fuel for the fire. And yeah, he was decent against Preston, wasn't he? He looked fired up. That shot with his left foot, if that would have gone in, that would have been, well, that would have been the narrative of the day, wouldn't it? It would have all been about Max Aarons even more than it had been. So let's just hope that Max carries on that sort of form at Bournemouth, and as long as he carries on like that, then Norwich are happy, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope that sort of puts it to bed now, and that Barcelona do sign Dest, and that's the end of it. And it's a nice quiet couple of weeks to the end of the window. But maybe I'm dreaming a little bit with that. Let's get through a few more of your comments, because I can see we've got a few. Quinton on YouTube, thank you very much for watching. He has said, "Am I the only one who feels some of our attacking during the last two games has been pushing too hard for the perfect pass or link, rather than our talent and shooters taking more chances? I feel that Timu Pukki and Todd Cantwell specifically can build more confidence from playing more open and taking chances after space." I think this comes back to the point we discussed when we were talking about Kieran Dowell in terms of fluidity. For me, it's probably more of a case of where Norwich are at the start of the season, and having so many new players and trying to adapt to how they play. I mean, Poeta's a perfect example. It kind of felt like his runs were sort of blocking off the fullbacks at times. And these are kind of the teething issues that you expect sort of at the early stages of the season, I'd say.
Yeah, he was better when he was on the left. I'll just say, actually, because I did say I'd update tonight, it was 1-0 at half-time. Norwich under-23s leading Palace under-23s 1-0. That Honda Mark goal. Josip Dermich had one cleared off the line early doors as well. But yeah, I mentioned this a bit in the Six Things on Monday in the Pink, and that the use of the ball just wasn't good enough to beat the press, was it? Because Preston's pressing was excellent. Alex Neil nailed it really tactically. He knew exactly how to disrupt Norwich, and they really chased after Norwich in that first half. Again, a bit like Huddersfield in the second half. I think they ran out of energy a little bit, and that's eventually where Norwich came into it, and they were eventually able to find those gaps. But just that sharpness of passing and movement wasn't quite there compared to how it was in the title winning season. You think about like the sort of triangles that you quite often had of Closer, Leitner, Stiepermann, Buendia during that title winning season. They just moved the ball so sharply, didn't they? And certainly Skipper McLean didn't do enough of that. The defence possibly didn't quite do enough of that. And Cantwell had a bit of a funny game, didn't he? He did see some of the ball. He did look threatening, but didn't really produce any end product. So, that's the rhythm that they've got to find, haven't they? They've got to be sharper with their passing. I wouldn't say it was too sideways. It just wasn't quick enough to beat the press. I don't think Bournemouth will set up to press Norwich in that same way. Bournemouth will want to dictate as much as Norwich were, weren't they? And they are quite similar. And I have noticed that Tyndall has switched to 3 at the back, though, hasn't he, since taking over? So that adds a slightly different dimension, and it's one that myself and I know plenty of Norwich fans are keen to see Norwich toy with, to have a go at 3 at the back, because it increasingly seems to be the trend for football, doesn't it? And it does certainly seem to be the trend that works for promoted teams to then be solid enough to kick on in the Premier League. So yeah, that is definitely the big thing that needs to change in the coming weeks. But until we've got the international break out of the way and everything's settled down and transfer windows closed and we know who's here, I think it's going to be a little bit difficult for them to really find that rhythm.
Yeah, I would agree. And Daniel certainly echoed your points earlier in his press conference today about his disappointment in how they didn't bypass the press in the way he would have hoped last weekend. And he certainly is keen to see a bit more control in their possession. And I get the sense that he's probably expecting a game against Bournemouth that is going to be a bit more sort of controlled, rather than Preston were very in their face, relentless in terms of how they press. They're built in the image of Alex Neil, aren't they, in terms of being a little bit fiery and a bit in your face. And I thought they were a very good side, actually. It was a really good test. And the fact that Norwich came through it with a point, I think you have to take a lot of positives in that. And it was interesting that Daniel did say today that he praised them internally for the way that they adapted to changing to a 3 at the back in the second half. And he was pleased with that. And he kind of said that he wants that continuity of playing the 4-2-3-1, just so he doesn't sort of overawe the new lads with lots of information at one time. So I guess you can kind of understand it. And I wonder if, as the season goes on, we'll see maybe him change that base formation a bit more and go to a 3 at the back. And like I said, Sunday is going to be really interesting, because Tyndall has played a few formations, I think, since taking the helm of that club. So it's going to be interesting to see how they set up and how Norwich counteract. But I think it's going to be a very tactical game on Sunday, is kind of the impression I get. And it could lead us to your prediction of the 0-0. So we'll certainly see how it plays out. Wesley, on you, what was that, sorry?
Wouldn't that be fun? A nice long trip to Bournemouth on a Sunday. An overnight stay in a hotel. We don't really want to be staying in a hotel at the moment, do we? But we haven't really got much choice. Behind closed doors game, 0-0. Great stuff. Yeah,
let's hope the weather improves. That's the one thing. Wesley on YouTube has said, "What do you make of the second goal for Preston last weekend? For me, it was a lack of organisation in defence. Players only pressed the players in possession, while others remained in position." This was a point that Daniel made today. Actually, he was asked specifically about that second goal, and he did express his disappointment. He described Norwich as not being proactive enough, and then kind of criticised Ollie Skip a little bit, because he said he sort of ushered Zimmerman out wide and didn't quite sit in to follow the run of Sinclair in the way that perhaps he should have. It kind of seemed to me to open the old scars of last season a little bit in terms of their defensive frailties.
Yeah, I did see that comment, and I did think that was kind of abdicating responsibility for Zimmerman a little bit, because I think Zimmerman should be experienced enough to know not to go out there. Where's the danger? The danger isn't out wide, is it? His role should be to stay central and be filling that gap. Aaron's then sort of thought he filled it, but then thought Zimmerman was coming back in, and they just got caught crossing over, and Preston took advantage of it. Yes, Skip should follow Sinclair. From that point on, Godfrey actually makes a very good goal line clearance, doesn't he? And Skip is desperately chasing to try and make the block. But yeah, that was the moment where him and McLean really weren't offering that defensive shield. But I didn't think you could totally blame Skip for it opening up. But yes, he sort of tracked, but that hole should never have been vacated, whether he ushered Zimmerman to go out that way or not. If I'm a centre back, there's no way I'm going out there. Not when the opposition are attacking the box.
Yeah, I agreed. It to me, again, it's early in the season, isn't it? But it just kind of felt like the teething issues and the communication that perhaps isn't quite there yet, that maybe you'd hope. And I think really we can only take judgment of sort of their defensive efforts and any sort of real trends towards game 10, essentially. Henry, there you go, Dave. We've got a nice bit of a weather report here. Lovely weather down here in Bournemouth, lads. Well, let's hope it stays that way, Henry, because it's quite a small stadium, and I think you're probably quite exposed to the elements, aren't you? So for our point, I hope it's not as it is at the moment.
Yeah, the facilities are good at Bournemouth.
Yeah,
The press box is good. You've got a little TV, so you get some replays because obviously they had those years in the Premier League. So it's a decent press box. But where we're staying, we're not too far from the seafront. So I'm gonna, if the weather's not too bad, I was hoping to squeeze in a run on the seafront Monday morning before we head back to Norfolk. So let's hope the weather stays all right.
Yeah, absolutely. You can run and I'll build sandcastles. That sounds like a plan. Shane has said, I hear Daniel Farke mention in his press conference today there's an option to play free at the back if he chooses to, and it's good to have many different options. Will on YouTube said, I think that extra midfielder against Bournemouth is vital to bring some stability and balance into midfield. I do wonder if we'll see Marco Stiepermann for that very reason. And then Tracy has made two comments on Adam Eder, mainly about wingers. And we kind of saw him come on, didn't we, and play a slightly wide role. It was certainly behind the striker when he came on, and he seemed to impact the game quite well, I thought.
He did. I thought he was excellent, to be perfectly honest. You look at the late chance when Poeta crosses for Pukki and Declan Rudd makes the brilliant save in injury time. That was excellent build-up play by Adam. And this is the big reason why Ireland are so keen on him. And Stephen Kenny's, got him capped twice already at senior level because he's such a balanced striker. He is, by nature, more of a Pukki type poacher. He's got that sort of movement, but he's big and tall and he's got pace and he can hold up the ball. He's strong. He seems to have embraced that element of the game as well, in that if you're going to be a lone striker in a Daniel Farke team and you can offer that as well as the runs of Pukki, then you're onto a bit of a winner, aren't you? And Jordan Hugill must be a little bit frustrated already. He obviously was expecting to get it, but to get more chances, but immediately Eder's looking like he's pushing hard, and hopefully that will have a real big effect, and that means that Pukki's going to really have to keep scoring, because I don't see Adam's future as being out wide. But mentioning the three at the back there, that would allow that, wouldn't it? It would allow Eder and Pukki up front, and then you've got more chance of Hugill being able to come in and have an effect. The only thing with three at the back, I think that suits Norwich's defenders in a lot of ways. If you had Gibson or Closer on the left and then Godfrey on the right with one of Zimmerman or Hanley in the middle, I think that's a pretty decent back three by Championship standards. And then Kintier and Aaron certainly fine as wing backs, but it kind of marginalises Poeta and Hernandez then, I think, to quite a big extent. It may well suit Buendia and Cantwell as well in that sort of shape as well, because they like to be able to turn into a bit of space and run with the ball going forward, don't they? And try and pick the holes apart. So I'd just like to see that plan B being used more often, and that would help Eder. But it's going to be so interesting how he develops, because if he's not playing regularly, then he's going to get itchy feet, isn't he? Because his career is really kicking off at the moment. And from what we've seen him so far, he's doing all the right things.
Yeah, he certainly is. I spoke to former Norwich City striker Efan Ekoku yesterday, and he's a massive fan of Adam Eder. You can watch that chat on full on our YouTube page. It's well worth checking out. Efan's very. I'm trying to remember how Tony put it earlier, but sort of says what he thinks. I think, which people seem to like. Blunt, maybe, yeah, but in a good way. He's a lovely chap. Right, let's have our final bit of Daniel Farke audio. This was about him talking about some of the issues he might have in the coming weeks surrounding the speculation and the transfer window. Essentially, he said he's going to have to keep a very close eye on training to make sure that those players who are linked with moves away have the right mentality and essentially the importance of putting the group before any individual players. So here's Daniel again.
I can't choose right now a game day squad just because of quality or just because of potential. I also have to keep in mind, okay, who is really totally focused on our next task, who's totally switched on, who is really unbelievably disciplined. And if someone in this situation is not fully switched on, it's not like I accuse them to do this, because we're all human beings. So we have to keep in mind that we're working with human beings. That's quite normal, even if you don't want to be caught in, but that your thoughts are sometimes a bit different. And because all the influences, perhaps the family, the surrounding, the friends, the agent, whoever tries to influence, and sometimes players, it's not that easy for that. There will be always late decisions, who is in the squad, who is in the starting lineup, who is in the game day squad, and sometimes you even have to leave a player out who is there with unbelievable quality potential, but you got the feeling, okay, the mindset is not right there. Without accusing this player, it's quite normal. So I expect for the next 2 games we have to take sometimes even some tricky decisions in this terms to make sure that the core group, that the players, that the team is not affected by it, and the team is really focused.
There you go. City boss Daniel Farke there speaking at his press conference earlier today about the importance of making sure players have the right mentality. And I think, to be fair, most of that Norwich group are good lads. So I think that will be the case. Dave, I want to chat a bit more about Ben Gibson. We kind of touched upon him so far. Daniel was full of praise for him, and it's quite rare to hear him speak in such glowing terms about a player. He's usually quite keen to downplay it. But it sounds like he's had a very good week in training, and I think given sort of what we've discussed about Christoph Zimmermann or Ben Godfrey, I can sort of plausibly see a situation where we rock up to Dean Court on Sunday and Ben Gibson is in the starting 11.
Yeah, and that would be really intriguing because it's he's definitely someone who's going to need a bit of time to get his proper rhythm back. You would have thought he's not played a lot of football now for quite a while. Well, at least a year, isn't it? So he's an interesting prospect because this is a guy that got called up to the England squad a few years ago. He's been promoted from the Championship with Middlesbrough. He was, I think, he was ever present for them in the year that they were in the Premier League, and that's what got him the England call up. And there's a reason why Burnley bought him, because he's a solid defender and he's a big unit as well, isn't he? So it's going to be really, really interesting to see once he gets in there if you can get him back out again. Chris Lakey, our boss in the Pink and Live at the start of the season, he said that he thought that it should be Gibson and Godfrey from the start, didn't he? And just thought that Gibson should have the edge on Zimmermann, and we might see that playing out. But Zimmermann is such a popular guy and a player. When Zimmermann's on form, he's a great defender to watch, isn't he? Because he's so sort of dramatic and he loves those little heroic moments and things like that, doesn't he? Even the game that he got injured at West Ham last year, he made a brilliant block, didn't he? Before Haller cropped him, and the defending with his head on the floor at Wolves and all those sort of moments. He's the sort of character and the sort of leader that you want in your team. So the standards that Norwich are going to expect of Ben Gibson now are going to be quite high. If he came in and was a bit average, then I think quite quickly people would be calling for Zimbo to be back. So if he gets that opening, he's really got to take it, and he's got to show why Stuart Webber and Daniel Farke think there's a bargain to be had there.
Yeah, and speaking to him a few weeks ago, he seemed like he was chomping at the bit, really, to be given an opportunity. And yeah, just on Christoph Zimmermann, I wonder if he's the sort of player who feeds off the crowd, one of those that does give the extra 5-10% when the crowd are really behind him, and it does take a bit of sort of back to walls job. I wonder if he's struggling a little bit with behind closed doors football, but that's a guess more than anything else. It's certainly going to be interesting to see Ben Gibson when he does come in, and it was again interesting to hear Daniel say that he would be an option at left back if need be. He said that's something that they've looked at and sort of trialled in training, and he feels like he's got a very different option to Xavi Quintilla if that did sort of require Gibson to shuffle across, because he's probably got contrasting players there in terms of Quintilla, as we've seen in the opening 2 games, really keen to get forward, really keen to put in a cross at any opportunity. And then if Norwich did need to hold on to a win, then maybe you have the option for the last 10 or 15 minutes to bring on a more defensive option. And that could be the reason behind why we've seen Sam McCallum go out on loan.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that springs to mind is Dan Burn in the Premier League with Brighton.
That's a great shout, yeah.
Left back, haven't you? Who, so maybe we shouldn't doubt it. I'm just quickly pulling it up in front of me because I did go back and check, because Gibson did play at left back earlier in his career a few times, but it wasn't many. Here we go. I'll just load it. 9 games, but we're talking quite a while ago. We are talking once for York City in the National League playoff final, but that was 2012. So, he was a young man then. He played a few games for Plymouth when he was on loan in League 2 at left back. And he had 5 games for Middlesbrough in 2013-14 in the Championship at left back. So he's got that experience, but that last appearance is over 6 years ago at left back. So I don't think Ben Gibson is expecting to be playing as a left back. I don't think that's the direction his career is going at 27 years old. But until we get a better look at him, who are we to judge any better than Daniel? But I would imagine that would only be a sort of the emergency option if Quintilla isn't available at that point. I think it's probably more likely that he'd go Bali Mumba there, just in terms of the playing style, unless it was a difficult away game like Bournemouth that Quintilla was unavailable for. So yeah, I don't. Let's hope we don't have to worry about Ben Gibson at left back.
Yeah, let's hope so. And Daniel was keen to stress that he did believe his best qualities were as a centre back, and I think you only have to look at his career trajectory to agree with him on that. I think, given how many performances he's made in that position. We've got a few more questions before we round off. Matt Gregory on YouTube has said, do you think Josip Drmic, Tom Trybull and Mo Leitner will get clubs before the window shuts? Yeah, this is a difficult one because you can, I guess there's a possibility now of a few weeks left in the window that they do stick around, and then Norwich have got a dilemma of 3 players who aren't really in their plans still at the club, and that's not a position that they really want to be in.
Well, I mean, that's been the position with Leitner since January, isn't it? We all expected him to go then, and he didn't get his move. So it's interesting. He's playing in that under-23s game at the moment, which is still 1-0 from the last update on Twitter, and that was just before the hour mark. I mean, they're playing in those games, Leitner and Drmic, to get game time, and presumably so they can show that footage to scouts to show that they're fully fit and motivated and things like that, because I don't think there's any expectation they'll be coming back in. But again, I said it in my video verdict after the Preston game, that you compare what McLean and Skip were doing on Saturday compared to what Tettey and Leitner were doing 2 years ago, and it's incomparable. That was a brilliantly balanced central midfield pairing, wasn't it? That got the best out of Tettey. That allowed Leitner to have that freedom. And well, I mean, Mo was brilliant at times in that season. He had a few injury disruptions, but you always go back to the 4-1 win at Swansea, don't you? And he was just sensational. He absolutely bossed the game. And even the Newcastle game at the start of the Premier League season, he absolutely ran the show. And it's a shame that it's gone the way it has, because he is clearly an asset if you could bring him back into the Championship squad. More so than Trybull's a good, solid citizen, and he had his good games, and he's a really nice guy. But I don't think Tom Trybull's the difference between promotion and not, whereas Mo Leitner could be if you really brought him in. I mean, Drmic, I think most Norwich fans, as soon as relegation was sealed, just didn't see him as a Championship player, did they? He's not the sort of person who's going to be necessarily getting in the trenches, although I think he has maybe been a little bit harshly treated by some fans, because he did put plenty of effort in last year. He did score the goal at Tottenham and stuff, didn't he? So I don't think he was quite as much of a like some people make him out to be like some sort of terrible player who didn't put in any effort for Norwich. I don't think that's necessarily fair. But yeah, I agree with letting him go. But yes, that threat is there, and the bigger issue with that is that the European window closes on Monday, October the 5th at 11 p.m. So if they're going to go abroad, then they've only got 10 days to get that sorted. And then it's till Friday, October 16th at 5 p.m, which is when the domestic window closes. So they would then have another less than 2 weeks to get a deal with an English or Welsh club, which you wouldn't have thought is particularly likely, would you? So yes, that is very much a threat that they're going to be sort of lumbered with 3 players there who are out in the cold and being paid decent money, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's not a position that they want to be in. It's that time of the show now where we get into sort of the last 5 minutes or so. I want to get your score predictions for Sunday, so start getting them in the comments, and we'll flick a load of those on screen before we get Dave's thoughts at the end of the show. We'll also come to another video at the moment, and obviously fans aren't going to be in attendance, but we'll take you to the Vitality Stadium virtually. We'll just go through a few more comments before we play that video. Shane Jones with a really good point, and again, this is one we've kind of stressed throughout the show, and he said we have to remember that our first 5 games of 2 years ago, we didn't start that great, and I hope over the course of the season we can push on. I think it was actually 1 win in 6, wasn't it? I think from memory served. So it just goes to show really that this stage of the season is probably about laying the foundations and about performances perhaps more than results, and maybe it will suit both Norwich and Bournemouth that this game has come so early on, where perhaps they can be a bit more experimental with their play.
Yeah, the season isn't decided at this point, is it? You know, you look at the Lambert team in 2010-11. They were in the mix halfway through the season, but it was the second half of the season where they really hit their stride. Probably the small matter of a 4-1 home win over Ipswich in November, but it really sort of sparked them into life, didn't it? And of course, Simeon Jackson became the hero of that second half of the season. So, you know, the Championship is a marathon, not a sprint, as we'll hear so many times. And if you can just be in and around the mix at Christmas, then you've got a good shot at pushing on from there, which is, you know, when you look back at when Neil Adams was dismissed in 2014-15, it does look quite harsh, doesn't it? You know, I think that was based on how things were going on the pitch, when you could see that things were getting a bit disjointed. But haven't they beaten Huddersfield 6-0 and Millwall 5-0 or something like that at Christmas? And then he lost at Shrewsbury in the cup and gets sacked. But to when you look back at that, but yes, it's about staying in the mix. Dermot has hit the bar for the 23s. So
there we go.
Nearly got a goal. Nearly,
but not quite for Josip. Before we go on to this video, Don's put a comment on Facebook which made me laugh. And he's put, "Can we give a thought for poor Jamal Lewis, who took one for his new team last weekend?" We're probably better to speak to our producer Tony, who's sort of in the background pulling all your comments up. Who as you might have known if you listen to the Pinkham podcast, more than publicly displayed his allegiance to Newcastle United, but that definitely looked a sore one. I think Steve Bruce said today he's not quite sure if it will rule him out. Eye injuries are always a bit complex, I think, but certainly nasty from Bissouma, wasn't it? And probably a bit unneeded.
Yeah, I guess he's probably got a sort of badly bloodshot eye after something like that, when you get literally kicked in the face. I mean, when it first happened, I was working on Sunday, and you know, you have TweetDeck sort of open, you got loads of things dropping in, and I saw quite a few people saying that was ridiculous, that it was a red card because it was accidental, and I think it might have been Ali McCoist or something like that. It's one of the TalkSport pundits who were saying that it was ridiculous, but that's intent is irrelevant, isn't it? You cannot put your foot up like that because it is dangerous play, as was perfectly shown there by Jamal getting kicked in the eye. So, yeah, tough luck basically. But yeah, hopefully he's all right.
Yeah, we won't turn this into a Newcastle United show, but keep your score predictions coming in. We'll come to our final bit of video and then we'll round off the show. This is Norwich City's virtual trip to Dean Court on Sunday. Obviously, supporters won't be able to be there, but if you were, this is the route that you might take if you were flying, perhaps. I've just had a really no, yeah. I've just had a really bad moment. I've just gone to switch my light on because obviously I'm losing darkness in here, and I've forgotten that my light bulb's completely gone. So I've gone to turn my light on and nothing's happened. So yeah, exactly. That's why we're still sat in the darkness. But at least it's not the power cuts that some people have been experiencing today, so that's a positive. Let's flick through a few of the score predictions then before we close it off for the night. Joe McKenzie 2-1. I'm guessing that's to Norwich for me. Shane, my heart is saying 2-1 win, but realistically maybe a 2-2 draw, but I think there'll definitely be goals. Tracy has said 2-1, Pookie and Adam Eder. And then Uncle Mort on YouTube said his Arnell's new hair colour, a homage to you, Connor. Well, I can't confirm nor deny that. I think his is a bit more yellow than mine, in fairness, but I'll try and ask him when I get the opportunity. He does like his colourful haircuts, doesn't he? Now I think there's
already.
What's that? Sorry,
and he got rid of it already. Chris Reeve from Norwich City put some tweets up earlier in the week, didn't he? I know Nell's given him some signed boots to donate to the Big C or something like that, and it looked like he'd already changed his hair, his hairstyle, unless they were old, maybe. But
yeah, you could be right. If he is trying to pay homage to me, then that's not the best sign if he's got rid of it after 2 weeks. Finally, Harry's finishes off by saying we'll take a point, but fear it will turn out to be 3-1 or 3-2 defeat, which is a bit of a sour note to end on. Dave, before we go, how do you see this game going? It's as we've said, going to be a really interesting game to sort of gauge where the two teams are. How do you feel it'll go?
Yeah, when I said 0-0 earlier, I was being kind of flippant, but I can see them cancelling each other out again. I think I'd go for 1-1 if I'm being a bit more serious. I'd be surprised if Norwich didn't score. And to be frank, if they were to draw this game and then hopefully beat Derby, who seem to be in a bit of a strange place at the moment, or you could say for a few years now, if they were to win that home game going into the international break, and then you'd have 8 points from the opening 4 games. No, I was right the first time, wasn't I? That would be 6, 7, 8 points. Yeah,
there you go. Yeah,
in the first 4 games, then you'd be very happy, wouldn't you? I think if you'd have offered that to certainly to Daniel at the start of the season, 8 points from your first 4 games, he'd have taken that, and I think most realistic Norwich fans would have taken that as well, because you'd be unbeaten for a start, you'd have a base to build on, and I just think the style, the position that both are at the moment, I do think they'll cancel each other out. That video that we just flicked up there that Tony's pulled together, obviously the 0-0 last year was reasonably attritional, shall we say. The 2-1 defeat in the League Cup 4th round the season before, when Bournemouth were a Premier League team, and Norwich probably should have won that game. They had the chances. The one that always sticks out in my mind was Ivo Pinto got sort of hauled off in that game, didn't he? I don't know if it was at half time or just after half time. And I remember turning to Pad and Michael at the time and saying, I reckon that'll be the last time we see Ivo in a Norwich shirt, because he that was the time when it really started to look like he wasn't part of Daniel's plans and just didn't look as good as Max Aaron's, to be perfectly honest. So some interesting memories of Bournemouth, but it'd be nice to get a first win. But as we now know that it's the 6th best beach in Europe, then we're definitely going to have to go for a jog on Monday morning.
Yeah, there you go. It's stats like that. That's the reason you all watch on a Friday evening. Dave, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you guys as well. Make sure you check our channels at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We've got something very special planned on our live video. So make sure you tune in, and I think it'll be a bit of a treat. So I don't think you'll want to miss that tomorrow morning. So put that in your diaries. Thank you all very much for watching. Pinken.com, the place to go for all of your preview content, all of Daniel Farke's stuff from his press conference today, Dave's column in the morning, plenty of other good stuff up there as well. Let's hope Norwich City can make it 7 points from 3 games. We will, of course, be at Dean Court on Sunday, so of course you can follow us, Pinker.com, live blog, analysis, opinion, all the good stuff from Norwich City's trip to the South Coast will be there.
We're off with Dermich, I think, has scored goal. A distanced effort from Dermich pays off well for the striker, who finds the back of the net. 2-0 in the 81st minute for the under-23s.
There we go. What better way to end it? Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe, and we'll see you all again very, very soon.